Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Simon from Scarr Illustration, and I hope you're keeping well. Today I'm going to talk about how you can create accurate drawings for your paintings by using techniques that I've developed over many years. This method is suitable for both digital and traditional mediums. Let's dive in. The first thing I do is spend a couple of minutes just looking at my reference. And in this case, it's a photograph. When I was taking photographs for this study, I knew that I wanted some sort of dramatic lighting so as to get a good framework for an interesting painting. Once that's done, I'll then move the photo to the side and create a canvas that's either the same size or dimensions as the photo. Next, I'll throw down the first marks to establish where the object is in space. In these initial steps, I'll stay away from using curved lines and just stick to straight lines. This makes it a bit easier to get things in the right place, and I can worry about putting in all the curves a bit later on in the process. Once I have a few brush marks down, I'll then go back to my photo and start putting in some horizontal guidelines. These will help me pinpoint exactly where things are instead of where I think they are, because generally what I think is right is actually wrong in reality. I'll then line up those guides on my canvas so that they match with the photo. When I'm doing this, I'm paying close attention to my angles and distances, as these things become more important and evident as the drawing progresses. If I was doing this traditionally, I would start with a rough shape so I can get a sense of the overall dimensions. And then I'll add in some guidelines and base my measurements off of those to inform how the rest of the drawing will be laid out. Whichever method I'm using, I make peace with the fact that there will always be a bit of redrawing in order for me to get things to where they need to be. And in the case of digital work, I'll use the transform tool if I feel something isn't quite right. Once I have some of the horizontal lines down, and I've roughly established some of the areas, I'll start indicating the vertical guidelines. Again, I'm paying close attention to distances between the lines and the angles of my brush marks. By the way, the brush I'm using is just a hard round brush which has the shape dynamics and transfer options turned on in the brush settings. I find this brush is perfectly adequate for this type of drawing. Every now and then, I'll turn off my guides to see how the drawing is progressing, and if anything looks off. As the drawing progresses, mistakes will become more evident, and I'll need to adjust the guidelines and some of the marks I've made to ensure that I'm heading towards a more accurate drawing. Now that I have the basic shape of the skull down, it's time to tackle the internal details. At this point, I'll be adding more guidelines so I can accurately pinpoint different elements. It's kind of like creating a visual map for the drawing. Whilst I'm doing all of this, I'm spending more time looking at my reference than I am at the drawing, in order for me to get the drawing as accurate as possible. As well as that, I'm totally okay with having to redraw whatever is needed in service of improving the drawing as a whole. Every now and then, I'll flip the drawing to see how things look at a different angle. The longer I look at something, the less I'll notice things that are off. Oftentimes, some elements will need to be adjusted as my eye is not used to this new angle. And when I flip it back, I'll notice even more things that need to be fixed. At this point, I'm not overly concerned with the finish of the drawing. I'm more interested in how accurately I've depicted everything so far. After I'd mapped in most of the details, it was time to get started on the finer details. And I started with the teeth. I found that teeth can be especially tricky to get right, and that I have to spend more time really analyzing all the different angles, and where things are in relation to others. As you'll see, there was a bit of back and forth in order for me to get these right. At this point, it was time to turn off the guides and work with just the sketch. This is where I spent some time cleaning up some of the lines and making sure that they were as close to the photo as possible. This of course involved moving some things around, and some redrawing of certain elements such as the eye sockets and nasal cavity. As well as that, I started adding in more details to the jaw and the areas around the teeth. I also started indicating where the shadows would be, as well as some light shading and cracks in the skull itself. For this stage of the drawing, I found that I needed to zoom in a little bit so as to get those finer details a bit more accurate. Drawing is a fundamental skill for all artists. I also think that the better your drawing skills are, the better your paintings are. And by that I mean the framework or foundation is better described and thought out, which will make it easier to paint with less mental math. Most of us start out by simply drawing and trying to emulate the world around us, or worlds we imagine. I think that neglecting your drawing skills is a mistake. It will not only lead to dissatisfaction with your work, but will also mean having to go back to those fundamental skills at some point down the road. My point being is that there are no shortcuts to improving, and even the most accomplished painters today and in the past still had to rely on excellent drawing skills. In part 2 of this video, I'll go through how I use this drawing to accurately represent the reference photo with a digital sketch, and how much more efficient it is to start from a solid foundation than to work on a house of cards. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful. And if it was, please consider liking this video and subscribe to my channel, as this will make it easier for me to continue creating this type of content. Also, let me know if you have any questions or if there's some other aspect of painting that you'd like to see in future videos in the comments below. Have a good one, and keep on painting.